Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. It's Monday. Hope to make this fairly interesting. We'll start on a very focused topic, and then of course as people want they can diversify the topic of interest. Today what I wanted to talk about is how in certain group of people with obesity they actually had a worse outcome when it came to COVID-19. So we'll start with that kind of data. That data came out of Italy because of course the Italians got hammered hard, so they learned the hard way as to, in retrospect what happened to them, how the system got overwhelmed. And it's really the system being overwhelmed that's the problem. So as people are joining on today, what we want to do is talk about obesity, but the difference between healthy obesity and unhealthy obesity. But in terms of what happened with COVID, the Italians were, as I said, ahead of the curve. So just to reiterate some of the scenarios that were picked up following the COVID issue with the Italians, was that what they found was that pre-existing condition was definitely the case in 99% of all the deaths. And of the deaths, whether it's heart disease or diabetes or blood pressure, that people had at least two or more comorbid conditions. That number one risk for people with death was actually high blood pressure. And even though there was increased deaths because of diabetes and heart disease. So the same Italians I would say the same Italians, but not the same people in the studies. Out of Bologna, a PhD doctorate who was looking at, in retrospect, what happened as to who got admitted to the ICU and how many of those people died. They found that a BMI of over 30 was a critical difference between people being admitted as well as dying. So obesity definitely is an increased risk factor when it comes to COVID infection. But I wanted to talk about the fact that the same doctor out of Italy mentioned about healthy obesity versus unhealthy obesity. So the CDC have recommendations, and those recommendations is that if your BMI is less than 18, you may be underweight, which I disagree with. If your BMI is between 18 and under 25, that's acceptable, which I disagree with. I think it depends on if you're a man or women, right? Women are allowed a higher BMI and not be classified as overweight or obese. If your BMI is between 25 and 30, it's classified as overweight, and over 30 is classified as obesity. Now that I'm mentioning a BMI, because that's the standard that has been followed by medical journals, and there's some reasons behind that. It's because it's a ratio between your weight and your height. So it's standardized, right? Your weight and your height. But it doesn't cater for somebody who's a solid built versus a light build, right? So you could look very slim on the outside, but you could be fairly solid, meaning heavier bones, heavier muscles, because as you know, a muscle is more dense. So I actually prefer body composition. I'll use BMI as a number because, like any numbers, you can track it. So when they talk about obesity, I agree. Obesity is definitely a risk factor for most diseases, and now we're finding that even early stages of obesity, which they call class 1, is between 30 BMI to 34, and class 2 is 35 to 39, and BMI of over 40 is classed as really very severe obesity. But BMI, as I said, I don't think is as accurate in my mind with your body composition as your percentage body fat. So when your body fat is high, then your lean body mass is low. When your body fat percentage is low, then your lean body mass is high. And it's better to do bioimpedance, which is where you could use a handheld device or electrodes that are on the hands and all four limbs, or hands and feet. But the bioimpedance, the electrical currents traveling through the body, can give you percentage body fat, which I find much more useful personally in my day-to-day action. But I wanted to bring up the fact that conventionally doctors use BMI for a good reason, because it's standardized, and we always like standardized things, whether it's good or bad. And the standardizing is because it's a weight divided by the height. There's a ratio, right? Now, so what we said is that what I wanted to really talk about is there are actually metrics to differentiate two people with obesity. So you could have the same BMIs of say 30, but there's a difference between healthy obesity and unhealthy obesity. I'm going to go into that and elaborate on that for sure. But as you also heard from me, is that there's a difference between BMI, which is just a fixed ratio between your height and your height and weight, as opposed to lean body mass. And there's so much evidence to show that lean body mass is far more beneficial for you, and therefore having a lean body mass would mean that you would have a lower fat mass, lower percentage body fat. And it's very, very important. So let me just go over the quick things that I disagree with, right? So when people say a BMI of 30 is obesity and a BMI of less than 18 is underweight, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. My BMI can range between 14 and 17. So would I be classed as underweight? I doubt it, because I feel pretty damn fat when I'm at 17% body fat versus 18. But BMI is different. I actually don't use the BMI. You know, I'll tell you why I don't use the BMI. Just right now, I'm in a kind of a steady state. I'm about 16.5 body fat, right? It's not competing with other people. It's tracking yourself. So for me, the best I've ever got to is 14. That's probably after the month of Ramadan, right? And the highest I generally get to is about 18. Very rarely went to 20. Again, it depends on your hydration status when you're measuring bioimpedance. And so that's body fat. So now that my body fat is at 16.5 right now, the BMI reads 23.3, which makes no sense at all. That actually suggests that I'm between 18 and 25, therefore I'm normal. I don't think 18 and 25 is normal, right? I think that body fat is a much better way to look at it, and a body fat of less than 20 is definitely desirable for men, and a body fat definitely less than 30 for women. But of course, if you want to be more healthy, then you'll be in the lower range. There is an unhealthy point. So only athletes who cut weight or are very athletic get into the single-digit percentage body fat. And women, if they're very athletic, get into the less than 20% body fat, which is actually pretty damn good for women, right? Because women have a distribution of muscle and fat that's very different to men. Even the bone density can be quite different to men. So when we're looking at body fat, we're looking at really the density of the body through bioimpedance and not just a ratio between height and weight. So now I really want to talk about healthy obesity versus unhealthy obesity. There are three ways to understand about unhealthy fats. One is a low adiponectin. Adiponectin is released from healthy adipocytes. So if you have unhealthy fat, like a toxic fat, your unhealthy lifestyle, you don't sleep well. So it's not about the amount of fat, it's the release of adipocyte is dependent on the health of your fat. In other words, healthy obesity or healthy fat. So just because people are overweight, in my practice, a significant number of my patients are overweight, but they're healthy, therefore they don't get the diabetes, they don't get the heart disease, they don't get the blood pressure. And so I have a lot of experience in validating the difference between healthy fat and unhealthy fat. So one of those parameters is adiponectin. When your fat releases adiponectin, that means you have healthy fat. You're less likely to have insulin resistance. If you have low adiponectin, then you'll have unhealthy fat and you'll have more likely incidence of insulin resistance. So the other categories where the unhealthy fat is very synonymous with insulin resistance, because you find that the people who are unhealthy, who don't exercise, who don't eat the right way, who don't sleep enough, they also have parallels with insulin resistance. And so what are those parameters? They're called interleukins and cytokines. These are messengers, right, which happen to be released by fat too, right? So adiponectin is released by fat, as well as cytokines are released from fat in many other complicated ways involving the liver as well. And they all emanate from signals that start in the gut microbial flora, okay? So what are those? So tumor necrosis factor is synonymous with insulin resistance, and it probably parallels unhealthy obesity. The other one would be interleukin 6. Having higher interleukin 6 would be synonymous with insulin resistance, and also adversely impact the health of your fat, making you an unhealthy obesity. The other one is CCL2. It stands for cytokine. It's a cytokine ligand 2, CCL2. So that's associated with insulin resistance and more than likely going to be synonymous with unhealthy obesity. So more important than fat is it healthy or unhealthy? More important than BMI is actually percentage body fat, because you know that when you have better lean body mass, it's better not only for your muscle it's better for your body composition, it's better for your bone strength, it's better for metabolism, it's better for better cognition. So all that is valuable information. And unhealthy fats, the reason why there's a difference between healthy and unhealthy is the chemicals that are released, the immune mediators that are the messengers that are released from the unhealthy fats. That's what actually creates the inflammation. That's what actually creates the oxidation. That is what then leads to the bad outcome. So I know there was a couple of questions that came in, so let's see if I can sort of wrap the information that I've been saying with the question and then maybe elaborate a little bit more. So today we're talking about, the fact that in the retrospective studies in Italy, they found that the people that ended up in the ICU with COVID, the ones that had a BMI, that's body mass index, of 30 or more actually had more admissions to the ICU and deaths compared to people with less than 30. And so there is no level of BMI above 30 that I think is good. And frankly, I like the idea of body fat index. So men should definitely have a percentage body fat of less than 20, and women should have a body fat percentage of less than 30. So Mr. MR Shock, I'm 6'4" and 220, very athletic. Considered obese in the BMI. Correct. So that you've mentioned my point is that having a ratio between height and weight doesn't take into consideration somebody who is dense with this density with muscle mass, or dense just because they're, you've heard the phrase heavy boned, right? And I think that's really a fact. I don't know that there's any scientific correlation with it, but I definitely know what it feels like, also what it looks like to have heavy bones, because those people are actually pretty solid in many ways. They're actually resilient. So people that have a greater grip strength actually have better health outcomes. Little observations, I would say. So that's why I don't like BMI, because it's a ratio between your height and your weight. The percentage body fat is much more useful in many ways. Isn't BMI useless? It is useless for me in the clinical sense, because I get much more value with the percentage body fat. But as far as studies are concerned, I'll tell you why they're using BMI, because it's a reproducible metric. There is some value of having something that's reproducible. The reason why they may not like bioimpedance is because there's a lot of variation between one instrument versus another. An instrument that is $150 or $200 versus something that's $5,000, right? So there is a lot more variability. That may be what it is. But for my purposes, because I'm used to my equipment and I'm used to using the same equipment to all my patients, I figured out the metrics that are healthy versus unhealthy. So I would say that you can't compare one BMI machine with another in an absolute manner. But you can't measure one percentage body fat with another machine with percentage body fat, because there will be some inherent variability. How far, we don't really know. I doubt if it's more than 1 or 2 percentage body fat difference, but again, there is a variability. But BMI is a fixed number. So if you give me a height and a weight, then whoever it is, wherever they are in the world, it's going to be the same BMI index. So that's the value why medical people tend to use BMI. And as I said, I will use the BMI, but not really in a clinical way, because I get much more information on the body fat percentage. So let's go back and talk about healthy fat. So people who have healthy fat, and even if you're in the obese range, which again by BMI it's over 30, that's not the end of the world, because I'm going to tell you that when you have a healthy fat, you're less likely to have inflammation, you're less likely to have insulin resistance, you're less likely to have oxidation. There's a great overlap between inflammation and insulin resistance, because insulin resistance can be at 2 levels. One is the metabolic level, just when you're deficient in certain nutrients like magnesium, when you're deficient in biotin, when you're deficient in chromium, when you're deficient even in vitamin D, frankly, and vitamin C, you can have some insulin resistance. I consider that metabolic. The other one is immunological. Immunological because that's where the interleukins like 6 is so detrimental, not only for insulin resistance, but many other inflammatory conditions, because as I said, there's overlap between insulin resistance and inflammation. That's why if you have inflammation, you're going to have insulin resistance. So when I turn off inflammation, the patient's the blood sugar drops without me even trying to drop the blood sugar. And so that's why I think it's very important to understand the difference between healthy fats and unhealthy fats. and that inflammation and insulin resistance go hand in hand. The reason for that is that it's all about the connection. There are about 5 areas that you have to worry about with insulin resistance, but the 3 primary areas are the gut and the liver and the pancreas. That's only 3, but they're very, very interconnected. And when you have inflammation emanating because of any one of them, you'll have insulin resistance. If you have insulin resistance, it's likely you also have risk factors for inflammation. They go hand in hand. The other 2 areas for insulin resistance is at the muscle level. The muscle level meaning the insulin sensitivity at the muscle level. So if you have lots of fat stored in your liver and your muscles, then you're going to have a higher likelihood of insulin resistance. So I've mentioned the gut, the liver, and the pancreas as 3 areas for insulin resistance. And I said there was 5, right? So muscle is one, and then what's the other one? Let me just quickly think, what's the other one? I'm having a little bit of a mental block about the 5th area. There is a 5th area. I'll get that to you. And that's as far as we know. You're going to find that there are going to be multiple objective parameters. There's not going to be a single one thing that can tell you insulin resistance or no insulin resistance. The reason why I hark on about insulin resistance because it's synonymous with unhealthy fats. And insulin resistance not only makes it difficult to control sugar, whether you're going to become diabetic or not. Let me repeat that. Whether you're going to become diabetic or not, insulin resistance makes it hard to keep your sugar optimal. And this is the crux. When you have insulin resistance, you're going to drive blockages, atherosclerosis, because insulin resistance is one of the biggest drivers for heart disease in terms of blockages. That's why we call it a cardiometabolic spectrum, right? So cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar is a part of a cardiometabolic spectrum. You can add stroke and heart attack to that. It's a cardiometabolic spectrum. It's better to think of it as a spectrum than a very discrete, finite condition, and doctors fall into the trap of making this specific diagnosis. Part of it is the way you're trained, and part of it is the way that doctors get reimbursed. I don't worry about reimbursement as my primary goal, because if I deliver care to my patients, they pay me directly. If I don't get good results, they don't come back, then I'd be out of business, and I'm okay with that. So I deliver the care and people pay for that service. You can call that good old-fashioned medicine, but so long as the results are there, I think it's value for money. Now, the reason why doctors fall into that trap, because once they are not only making a diagnosis for reimbursement purposes, they find themselves managing patients in these discrete, finite, black and white perspectives, and that's why they get what we call the results of 2-dimensional medicine. Because 3-dimensional medicine means where all of these things like insulin resistance is a phenomenal condition to think about 3D, because it's multiple things working at once. It's the gut and the microbes, it's the adiposity. Oh, that's the part I was mentioning. The insulin resistance works on adiposity, not the amount of fat on the outside, but the amount of fat inside the body, which we call visceral fat. That's another indicator of insulin resistance. So it's very, very important to understand that the health, it will always trump the body fat, BMI or body fat, because you could have a healthy body fat. So let me make a parallel for you. So 2 people with cholesterol, exactly the same cholesterol. What is it that gives one the heart attack and the other one not the heart attack? Well, let me make it a little bit more easy for you. You could have a person with high cholesterol with no heart attack, and you can have a person with low cholesterol that ends up with a heart attack. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying here is that of the people who end up with heart attack, half of them had normal cholesterol. So let me repeat that again. Of the people who have heart attacks, half of them have normal cholesterol. So you would have just as much chance of getting the right answer as me if somebody came with a high cholesterol or a normal cholesterol. Then you guessing whether they're going to have a heart attack or not, or me guessing, would be exactly the same, because if it's 50-50, you may as well guess. And that's why you need the advanced cardiovascular evaluation. You need to differentiate the markers that cause blockages versus markers that give rise to a true heart attack. And so similar, yet so far. So same with diabetic. You can have 2 diabetics with the same hemoglobin A1C, same medication, all being equal. Why is it that one gets heart disease and the other one doesn't? Because one has insulin resistance. Not all diabetics have insulin resistance for the reason I just said. If you're a diabetic and you have healthy fat, healthy visceral fat, you have healthy fat, you're not likely to have as much insulin resistance, so you can control the sugar better, and you're less likely to have cardiac outcome. And why should a diabetic be interested in cardiac? Because they have twice as much risk of getting a heart attack. And so you may say that if your diabetes is worse, you're going to have more chance of getting a heart attack. That's not true. If you're pre-diabetic versus a diabetic, both have the same risk of a heart attack. Now, a heart attack is different from blockages. If you've been a diabetic for 25 years versus a diabetic for 5 years, then the chances of the guy that's had diabetes for 25 years is more likely to get blockages, which are different pathology, different pathophysiology than somebody that's had diabetes for 5 years. But I didn't say that. I said myocardial infarction. That's a heart attack. That's where there's an occlusion, a blockage of the heart from platelets, not cholesterol. Okay, so that's why it's so important to differentiate the difference between two diabetics, so important to understand the difference between two identical cholesterols, because that's why we look at things at a deeper level, and sometimes I will refer to it as looking at the root cause. Once you look at the root cause, there's never one way of looking at it. There are multiple levels of it. That's why you have to think of it in 3 dimensions. So if you just have a high cholesterol and you think of it as high and low and just lower it, you're not going to get great results. If you think of blood pressure as high and low and just lower it, you're going to get long-term benefits after a decade or 2 of managing it. But in the short term, you're really not going to get the benefits unless you answer the question, why did the blood pressure go up? So I'll give you an analogy of blood pressure. I'm sort of talking about large subject areas, and so if people want to ask me a specific question, I'm going to give you things to hopefully just make you think, right? So become much more insightful, so you can ask your question, ask your doctor the questions that you have for your personal goals. So the question would be, I had somebody with a normal blood pressure, but yet there's a lot of stiffness in their blood vessels. We call that augmentation index. Now, so I asked the patient, so even though your blood pressure is normal, are you okay with a stiff blood vessel, or would you prefer a soft blood vessel? It didn't take a rocket scientist or a qualified doctor. The patient said, I want soft blood vessels. That's the right answer. Because if you have stiff blood vessels, it's likely that there's something going on, either at the metabolic level, where you have certain nutrients that are missing, or it could be at the immunological level, and your blood pressure is stiffening up as a response to inflammation or oxidation. So it's very important for us to understand what's causing that, because she doesn't have hypertension. There's no point putting her on blood pressure pills because she does not have hypertension. Her blood pressure is normal as measured in the arm, but because I have a sophisticated machine, I'm able to look at augmentation. And so the main aim for me is to make the blood vessel soft and healthy. Then I'm going to prevent the short-term risks of that unhealthy blood vessel. Just like we have analogies of unhealthy fats, you can have unhealthy blood pressure, you can have unhealthy diabetes. All diabetics are not equal, all blood pressure is not equal, all cholesterol is not equal. That's why you have all this diversity in outcome. And so doctors practice what we call, evidence-based medicine. The evidence is based on very gross analysis of a group of people on certain medication or certain variable, one variable generally, and a group of people without that variable. Very gross, very simple, but nothing wrong with it, but it is what it is. Don't make more of it than it can tell you, okay? So anyway, so what I gave you was studies. The studies are about half the people with normal cholesterol have heart attacks. So half of the people with heart attacks had normal cholesterol. Of the diabetics, not all diabetics have the risk of the same incidence of heart attack, but diabetics as a whole have twice the risk of a heart attack as a regular, and a pre-diabetic has the same risk of a heart attack as a regular diabetic. Heart attack is very different to blockages. Okay, so anyway, so I talked about a lot of stuff here. So this conversation is going to go on for at least an hour. So when I get timed out, I'll get out of Instagram and then I'll log back in. So if you have the patience, come back in, and so we'll close up with some insightful stuff, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to unhealthy fats, because it's so connected with all this cardiometabolic spectrum that you're not going to do justice when your doctor just treats your blood pressure or just treats your cholesterol or just your sugar or just your obesity. You need to look at how each of those organ systems are communicating. They're not going to figure that out with basic labs. Basic labs means lipid profile. Basic labs means basic blood sugar or liver enzymes, or if they're lucky, you get a HSCRP, an inflammation marker. You're lucky if your doctor does a vitamin D. Those are helpful and get you in the right direction. You're super lucky if you get omega-3 leveled in your blood test. Those are all necessary to understand the interconnections of what really creates risk. can you save this for live? Yeah, so we're going to save it live for sure, Maria, and so it'll be uploaded on YouTube, frankly, and so let's see here. If someone's trying to go in live, feel free. And then I think there may be a question. Let's just see if I missed the question here. So how do you gain healthy body fat? Very good. That's a really good question. So let's get rid of that. So how do you get healthy fat? So you may already have the answer, which is, if you've listened to me, just follow the 5 pillars, right? And the 4 pillars are what everybody can do. Get good sleep. Don't put bad stuff into your body. Put good food into your body. Then supplement based on measurements, ideally. And then what I do is take that one step further. That's step number 5. So I would say that if you follow those steps, then you're likely to have healthy fats. Now, there could be genetic predisposition, right? So if you have a genetic, like I do, if you have a genetic predisposition for inflammation, it's going to be easier for me to develop insulin resistance. That's probably why diabetes runs in my family, my mother and father, but I don't have it, because I have the inflammation gene, and that's probably the mechanism that leads to diabetes. The other one is a cytochrome 1Q25. That is indirectly a reflection of the body's ability to convert glutamic acid to glutamine and subsequently to glutathione. The problem is that in the process of making glutathione, or lack of that ability, not only does it impact the glutathione production, as you know, that's good for the liver, but that without the glutamine, then my enterocytes, the cells in my gut lining, are not optimal, which is synonymous with insulin resistance. So people with poor enterocyte, because from the enterocytes you get incretins. Incretins make you have more insulin sensitivity. So it's really not a very clean, discrete way to say who has insulin resistance, who's at risk of diabetes. It's actually very complicated. That's why I say you need the 3-dimensional approach. This 2-dimensional approach of up and down, high and low, is not going to cut it when you talk about complicated subjects like insulin resistance. I may not be an endocrinologist, but I know what the studies are out there, and I use real-life practice of medicine to manage and control. I don't like the word manage, remember? I like to reverse it wherever possible. Prevent it or reverse it if you have it. So we predicted that, like I said, I've done the genetic testing on myself to understand why is it that there's a strong family history of diabetes, blood pressure, and cholesterol. It's not because there's a specific gene for them. Looking at the family history is good, because if you ask your mom and dad and they have it, you may as well assume you got the risk. But now I know my genetics as to what leads to the inflammation, then subsequent problems, and then what leads to the endothelial dysfunction and higher blood pressure. Neither of them are apparent in me. So if I don't even have endothelial dysfunction, I can't get high blood pressure. If I don't have insulin resistance, I'm going to say lowers the risk of diabetes, doesn't completely eliminate it. But my sugar has been perfectly well. In fact, my hemoglobin A1C is going lower as I get older, because as I get older, I'm getting more disciplined. So, big concepts. Actually, I hope you're following me, because what I'm talking about is actually high-level medical concepts, which the average doctor is not practicing, but it's doubtful if they're actually even knowledgeable, because they're not reading the right journals. You're not going to read the journals in JAMA about insulin resistance. You may read something on insulin resistance, and you know what it'll be? At the end of a prescription medication. So let me give you an example of that, because I want you to understand that I know my conventional medicine too, right? It doesn't take long to figure that out. All you got to read is a couple of journals, and you're already right up on the knowledge of current knowledge, because current knowledge with evidence-based medicine is super slow. It's super slow because of the technique that we use. Nothing wrong with it. I use that, and I use the journals from cutting edge, nature science, biology science, medical biology, many other areas. So where was I raving on? So insulin resistance. There's a drug out there, many drugs, and they're called GLP receptor agonists. GLP stands for glucagon-like peptides. So we use a lot of peptides in our office because peptides are messengers. So guess where this particular peptide comes from? Your enterocyte, and they're called incretins. So incretins are what is depleted in diabetics. I wonder why. Because diabetics have this weakness. As I said, I have that cytochrome P1Q25, and that is the mechanism of getting that insulin resistance, right? So this drug, Trulicity, Bydureon, and you name a few others. There's so many out there, right? probably Ozempic, those ads are, do jingles in your head, because after 6 p.m., 7 p.m., every other ad is a healthcare pharmaceutical ad, isn't it? So, Trulicity, Bydureon, and a few others, for whatever. So the point is that the reason why I don't put much weight on it is that I'm willing to learn the science of these drugs that stimulate GLP receptor agonists, which then make you more insulin sensitivity. And wait for this, it makes your hemoglobin A1C go down by a magic 1 to 1.5. It's like, that is ridiculously pathetic. Because I can make a hemoglobin A1C of 14 go down to 7. I can make a hemoglobin A1C of 10 go down to 7. I can make a hemoglobin A1C of 8 go down to 7. That's for the diabetic, right? And for the people that have hemoglobin A1C of 7, I can make them normal. What we're talking about is not 1.5 or 2. We're talking about factors much greater than that. Hence why it's so difficult for me to remember the name of the goddamn drug, because they're so damn pathetic. Now, if you're a drug pusher, I said it with all due respect, a pharmaceutical prescription medication, but actually it's a drug, right? So we're drug pushers. So now, if you're a drug pusher and that's all you know, then that's all you know. But if you go to the doctor, and if they don't know, then they can call someone like me. If you change your diet and lifestyle as the CDC recommend, you can get metrics much higher and beyond the standard care. So that phrase, I have a problem with that phrase, going beyond traditional medicine. That's going beyond traditional medicine, not being satisfied with 1.5 lowering in your hemoglobin A1C, not being satisfied at all. Because with even the CDC recommendations of diet and exercise, you can get much more dramatic if the doctor was educated in knowing what to eat, how to eat. It's not calories, it's what to eat and how to eat. And time feeding, that's what I'm talking about. And then understanding about, we talk about diet and exercise. What is it about exercise? What type of exercise gives you the best bang for your buck, right? That's why. So, I'll calm down now. So let's see. So the next question, do you recommend mapping my genome? And if so, how much does that cost? Look, I don't know about mapping the genome. There's so much data on genome. The only genetics I do are the genetics that impact my body's ability to methylate, the genetics that impact my body's ability to release nitric oxide, the genetics that impact my body's ability to produce glutathione, my body's ability to genetics that make my body produce inflammation. So this really, I can go on. The genetics that I use is about functional genetics, the ones that really have a day-to-day impact that I can alter. I can't change the genes, but I can get around the mechanism of how those genetics impact the outcome of diabetes and blood pressure and inflammation and heart attack. I can change the outcome. I can't change your gene, but I can change the outcome because I know the mechanism that is being compromised. So I find an alternative mechanisms to get to the outcome that I'm looking for. So it's very, very important to go for outcomes. This may be somebody trying to go live. Let's see if they are. So let's see, Shamamu. Let's see, that's a very interesting name. So we'll see if somebody wants to come on live here. Maybe not now. Sorry about that. I may have in my enthusiasm, I may have missed out somebody trying to come on live. Do feel free to come on back live, whether you're medical, non-medical, if you're nutrition, if you're fitness, if you're chiropractic, whatever. Just I'll be happy to engage. And so look, we talked about a lot of areas. So listen, you could be a normal person with no blood pressure, no diabetes, no heart disease, nothing. You could be in your 30s, you could be in your 40s, you could be in 50s. It really doesn't matter. Mere absence of disease doesn't make you normal, because as I just told you, the person who was in their 40s had normal blood pressure, yet they had stiff blood vessels. You could have normal sugar and still have insulin resistance. In other words, you're still at risk of a heart attack. That's why somebody with a normal cholesterol can still have a heart attack. Why? Because they probably had insulin resistance. They probably had inflammation. You'll never know unless you look for it. That's the problem. So it's about needing to know, and so we call that precision medicine. So I do genetics, which is precision medicine for you. I do intracellular nutrient levels, which is specific for individual. I do food inflammation, specific for the individuals, and the list goes on and on and on. That I do what we call personalized medicine, but it's based on precision medicine because it's cutting edge technology that I incorporate cutting edge knowledge and I put them together. And so the ultimate is what I do is the evaluation, which goes beyond a normal annual physical. I call it the executive physical, but it's the next health executive physical. Based on my physical, then I find metrics to, like pieces in a puzzle. I look at all the different systems, put biological ages on it, and understand the weaknesses and the deficits and the interference, address them all into like pieces of the puzzle, put them together, and incorporate a health program. Whether it's about preventing disease, reversing disease, or better still. So you predict it, so you can prevent it. And so if you can predict it and prevent it, should you have it, you can also reverse it. Depends on how far down the track you are. It's never too late to incorporate those things because those mechanisms that I'm describing to you are no different to the person having a greater function. So you'll not be able to function better at your physical performance with inflammation. You're not going to be functioning better with oxidation in your body. So therefore, having any of those problems will interfere with your day-to-day functioning, whether it's brain function, physical performance, sexual performance, they'll all interfere. That's why it's so important for a man to use their erections as a warning that if you're in your 40s, 40% of men have erectile dysfunction because they have lack of nitric oxide or decrease in nitric oxide, which will accelerate hypertension and other cardiac problems. If 50% of 50-year-olds have erectile dysfunction and up to 60% of 60-year-olds have erectile dysfunction, the point is if you deal with the root cause, then you can reverse it, plus you can have healthy blood vessels. And so the medications out there like Viagra and Cialis, they stop the breakdown of nitric oxide. They're being utilized for cardiac disease now, by the way, which they were talking about many years ago. Finally, they're using it for cardiac disease. But the point is that you want to be able to produce your own nitric oxide. And when you're healthy, you won't break your nitric oxide down as rapidly. So the drugs that we use like Viagra, Cialis, Levitra is to stop the breakdown of the nitric oxide. But once you have a critically low level, then those medications stop working. So what is a great way to improve blood flow is to follow the 5 pillars. I won't repeat that again to bore you. And then to make sure you produce your own nitric oxide. 2 easy ways. One is eat your greens, nitrates. But then the thing is you must have microbes in your body to convert nitrates into nitrites. Then you must have good amount of acid in your stomach to release nitric oxide. So therefore you need 3 levels: a good diet, healthy gut microbe, and a healthy acid environment in your stomach. The other one is exercise. As you exercise, the shearing force of the blood flowing through the blood vessels releases nitric oxide. One of the ways it does that is converting arginine into citrulline. So if you supplement with citrulline, that's another way to not only release nitric oxide but to lower your blood pressure. Grapeseed extracts can do that, by the way. I'm not going to give you any dosing and things like that right now because this is not that type of conversation. And so those are 2 of the most powerful ways. There is a slightly more complicated mechanism. It's the NOS system. It's an enzyme, nitric oxide synthase, and that exists in your nerves. It exists in the endothelium. That means your blood vessels. It exists as a response to immunological stress, like an infection. But that enzyme is going to be damaged by the common things we already know: high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high homocysteine. Things like that, lack of exercise, lack of sleep. So it's very, very important just to follow the 5 pillars. So now I'll repeat the 5 pillars because that is people who sleep well will not only live longer, they'll live longer. That's what the studies show. And they'll have a healthier microbial flora. They'll have higher cortisol levels in their body in the long run. People that don't put bad food in will have a better microbial flora. They won't have processed food that are high in preservatives and additives that irritate the brain. So at the very least, you may have disrupted sleep and worse still, more neuroirritative problems like anxiety. Number 3, if you put the right foods in, you're nourishing the good bacteria in your gut. And if you eat the whole foods, it comes with cofactors and enzymes that will be beneficial in addition if you are taking supplements. Supplements, because everyone knows it, most people are low in vitamin B12, most people are low in vitamin D3, and it depends on what your level of normal is, because even more people are suboptimal than they are in the lower range. And a range is between 30 and 100. Why is that? The range actually used to be between 30 and 80. It's because people realize that higher level is actually better. And why is the range as low as 30? Because people, if you made it any what's the word? Yeah, it's because to capture the people that are in the low range, because this range is actually called a reference range. It's not normal. Normal is over 60 for the average person, and I actually recommend people to be over 80 if they're suffering from other underlying problems, especially immunological challenges. Okay, yeah. So my philosophy, someone was complimenting me on the philosophy. It's the right philosophy, and it's not because I invented it. It's because I, as a seasoned physician, know how to combine what I was taught in medical school and my traditional training, and how to keep up with my traditional medical training, and then learning above and beyond. And that's why not only can I learn above and beyond, I can practice above and beyond. That's why I can go beyond the traditional medical care, because traditional medical care has a very low bar. It's very easy to exceed that low bar. Very, very easy. And so if people have any doubts, then how do I see? I have documentation of people that come in with one set of metrics, and then I have metrics to show otherwise. All right. And so if people have any questions about numbers and how to differentiate the two, I'll be happy to answer those. And so, I think within about 10 minutes, I'll get timed out. So if people have more specific questions, let's do that. But as I said, when I get timed out, I'm sure I will get timed out. Then what I'll do is I'll go back out and come back in. If people want to join me finally, that'll be great. All right, let's see if there are any more questions. We talked about blood flow, about how to be healthy, and that's the way to go. So you don't have to be a doctor. Just being healthy and following those 4 to 5 pillars that I talk about, you don't even need to do the genetic testing. The reason why the genetic testing is useful is because it explains when people, if you want to predict what's going on, it explains when people are having difficulty in getting the results, even though they lead a healthy lifestyle. That's what happened to me. I thought I was healthy, but yet I was still having symptoms that didn't make sense. And that's why my function was declining. And as a result, when I understood why, because I got the genetic weaknesses, that when I got around that, that's when my function went back up to normal. So I'm even further away from dysfunction. So that means that I should be quite a ways from disease, because function goes down before dysfunction, and then dysfunction left unattended, then becomes disease. So doctors, when they say they just picked up the diabetes early, they haven't, because dysfunction was at least there, and long before dysfunction, the function was going down, just like the erection's going down, and all the doctor does is prescribe, right? So by prescribing, you're doing a disservice, because you didn't let the patient address the real root, and so you did a disservice because you made the patient believe that you were truly treating the patient. You're not treating the patient unless you're treating the underlying cause. If I haven't made my point clear, I hope it's more clear now. And so, no disrespect, you're practicing just like I'm practicing with the license that we're given, but my standard is higher. So when I say I treat, I really mean I'm treating somebody. If I'm controlling, I'll tell you, and when I tell you that I've reached the limit of my capabilities, then I'll find you a doctor that can do something that I cannot do. Okay, do you recommend mapping your genome? Yeah. Anyway, so that was that question. And alaikum assalam. That's peace be upon you. Sleep well, not sleep more. Correct. You know, there was studies that I mentioned that between 7 and 9 hours is the range, but of course, some people can manage on a lower range and a higher range. So people that were sleep deprived and had sleep insufficiency had increased risk of cardiovascular bad outcomes, and the people with sleep apnea had the worst outcome, and people who slept over 10 hours also had a slightly bad outcome. So overdoing it is also a problem. And follow the circadian rhythm. That means that don't go to bed at midnight, go to bed at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock if you can, and don't wake up at even if you have 8 hours sleep, 9 hours sleep, don't wake up at 9 o'clock, don't wake up at 8 o'clock. Find that 8 hours between 10 and 6. That's perfect. But if somebody can go to bed at 9 and wake up at 5, that's fine. If you need more, that's fine. Some people can get by with less sleep, but that circadian rhythm, that's real. So we've had blood pressure outcomes to tell you that. So circadian rhythm is not only for the human body, it's the way the world revolves, and there's a circadian rhythm for the universe that was discovered by physicists. And I can't remember the exact journal that was in, but it was an eye-opener that, it really is true that the bigger picture is really what controls the whole universe, and the rules of the universe apply to us on a molecular level. So that applies to the human and the animal kingdom. All right, so let's see. So how can the blood in my brain go to other down under? I mean, that question, so is that as far I know, rewrite your question. So let's see what I can interpret out of that about blood flow and the brain. And so this is true. So most people that have insomnia, most people that have depression, anxiety, most people that have neurological problems, whether it's a diagnosis, like a stroke, or they have traumatic brain injury, they actually have low blood flow. So if you want to have any chance of recovery, the two things that are necessary for the body and the brain, which is blood flow and oxygen. So that's why blood flow is the most important thing, not just for blood flow for erections, but blood flow to your heart, but also blood flow to the brain. That's why that enzyme is called NOS. But there's an NOS, that's neuro, that's in the nerves, right? Then you have the ENOS, endothelium, that's in your blood vessels, and then you have the I, the immune stimulation, that is as a response to insults on the immune system, whether it's an infection or some kind of inflammation. And so all these things then impact your nitric oxide. So it's no surprise that people's nitric oxide goes down after 40, as evidenced by erectile dysfunction. And so does their testosterone, and so does their growth hormone. But it doesn't have to be that way. They're allowing it to go down because they're not following the right. Oh, somebody's coming back live maybe. Oh, that was a while ago, sorry. I think I may have missed that in your live video. Okay. Requesting live. Oh man, I keep missing the live stuff. Okay, there's some questions here. So how do you gain healthy fat? I can answer that one. Is 140/80 BP okay if it's in the family and you eat good and work out? Look, I'm not going to here to make a diagnosis or treatment, so I'll leave it at that. So if you want a diagnosis or treatment by any standard and stretch, then go to your doctor. And if you want me to be specific, then contact. You can find me in the bio and request a consult, and we can do that. But let me give a general statement. So the information that I'm giving is for general information and education. Then you take that to your doctor, and then he or she will prescribe and manage, and that's the right way to do it. Should you want to do that level with me, then again, a consultation is the way to go. Now, the question was 140/80. Whether you have a family history or not is unacceptable. So because they've even lowered the cutoff for treating blood pressure. It used to be that you could have a blood pressure of 145/90 and then would treat it. But now the new cutoff for treatment is 140/80. Whether you have family history or not doesn't matter. So that's conventional. I'm not talking about you specifically. The cutoff for treatment is 140/85. So my point is that if you listen to what I've been saying, that even when people's blood pressure is normal, that means it could be 135/80 or 135 this is say 135/80, but the blood vessels are stiff. That's a problem. So enough said. I think that you should be able to answer the question based on what I just said. I mean the relationship. What does that relationship mean? Okay, so blood vessel health and blood flow in the brain are absolutely related, absolutely. So when you have compromised sleep, you're affecting the blood flow. When you have a bad diet, you're affecting the blood flow. When you put the good food in, there's a positive outcome. And so in the same way with supplementation, that we will be able to prove that with the right supplementation, not only do we increase the nitric oxide and the blood flow in the body, we will show the brain scans of the people that we reversed. And so we've been doing the testing, and we have enough data. We'll get a little bit more, then we'll start to explain it. So remember, most of the things I talk about are things that I have great experience with. If I don't, I'm going to mention it to you and tell you that I don't have experience or I've read this. But most of the other things that I say is based on information, based on evidence that I have seen with my own eyes, and I carry out not on a one time, generally on a day-to-day basis. Okay, I mean the relationship, and I don't know about the question. If you have a bigger question, then come on live and we can go over it. So sorry for the question. You get it right. No, I don't get your question. Put the question not easy to understand. Yeah, I mean, look, no disrespect. I don't want to insult anybody with their English written, but you're breaking things up, so it's hard for me to follow that. So go on live or have a complete sentence so I can understand what you're saying. But you are, based on the little bits of what the question you're asking, I've given you that information between your diet, your sleep, and not putting the bad food in, how that correlates to your body being able to produce your nitric oxide through your diet, through exercise, and not damaging your NOS enzyme by following those same pillars. So those should be good enough information. I think I'll get timed out. So let's do this. Let me get out of the Instagram right now live and then go back in. And so, hi doctor, quick question. Are you familiar with the Dutch test? Yes, I'm familiar with the Dutch test. We've done it on many people. Yeah, so let me just get out of it. Let me end it right now. All right, so people were asking me about do I do Dutch testing? Dutch testing is a hormonal testing. There are hormonal testing labs out there that use saliva. There are hormone testing that do blood, not as good. And Dutch is particularly good because they look at the urine, which can give you steady state results. And then with the urine, you can take the test kit at home. So you get multiple points of data in a given day, and then you can time that data. So the question before people are joining, the question was, do I do the Dutch test? Dutch test is one of the better and more expensive testing for hormonal testing, adrenal testing, for men and women, pre-menopause, post-menopause. Dutch testing is urine testing. There are also salivary urine hormone testing. There are blood hormone testing. There are validity for urine and saliva and blood. But the urine is particularly good because you could take the kit home with you and get data points at multiple times in a given day in a different cycle if you're premenopausal for sure. So it is actually particularly useful. It's a very good lab and expensive one, unfortunately. But it's not about the expense. It's about the information that helps you get results. And if you get results, then it's a great investment for you, because not getting results means that you'll suffer. Plus, you'll be going around in the merry-go-round, what we call the healthcare system, which is really not a healthcare system. It's a disease care model, and it is what it is. So why don't we call it that way? That way, people won't be confused. Sometimes people assume, or in the medical world, they think that, well, maybe I may be giving people false sense of false information. It's like nothing from the truth, actually. I give the best information, and just because most traditional doctors don't understand it, they assume through ignorance that I may be giving them I may be yanking somebody's chain. But the fact is, the technology that I use is much more advanced than the average doctor. The knowledge that I get is much more advanced than the average doctor. And when I come on my own is when I put the two together. So there is no doubt that I'm giving a better level of service based on the outcomes that I get. And so there is no doubt about that. Now, let's turn that around. From a conventional standpoint, then I challenge every doctor to say, don't use the word treatment, but do ask the patients do tell the patients that your definition of treatment is to merely control it. And tell them the goals that you have. The goal of lowering that hemoglobin A1C. How low can you possibly make it from your experience? How low can you make the blood pressure? How can you predict a heart attack in a normal cholesterol? How can you predict the diabetic that's going to get the heart attack versus not? Why don't you, as a physician, be much more specific and not give the person the false sense of security that you know exactly what you're treating, you know the root cause, which you don't, and you know that your treatment is not merely treatment, it's merely controlling it, because most of the treatments don't actually reverse anything, as the conventional doctor should understand. And there's plenty of evidence to know about that. So, just finishing off on being a little bit provocative. But what I mean by provocative is to provoke thought. I'm not being provocative for the sake of being provocative. It's provoking thought so that you can be more thoughtful as a patient to ask your doctor some hard questions. Like a cancer patient, the ones that I have, they'll ask the cancer doctor, well, will I live longer with the chemo? Depending on the answer, you'll know that if you want that or not. Will I live better with the chemo? So ask direct questions to the doctor, and then when they don't give you a direct answer, you know what the answer is. So keep that in mind. All right. So, we covered that area. Let's see here. This Asfa guy, he hasn't followed up with any other questions. Hopefully, I've given them the education. So if people want to learn more, there's a lot of content on my social media, videos, cooking, exercise. There's stuff on my website, of course. So click the link on the bio, and then you can make an appointment that way. We can do it remotely. We can do it in face. You can share your own lab data with your other doctors. And so, I think it's totally understandable when you've been to many doctors, they can't figure out the answer, to get disheartened and to lose hope. But be sure that anybody complicated, anything that you've had other doctors fail, I'll be happy to look at that for you and give you an honest evaluation that can I help you or not. Somebody came in looking for something, and I told my staff, call them back and let me talk to them first. If I can help them, then we'll keep the appointment. If I don't think I can help them, they can save their money, they can save their time, they can save my time by not coming in and wasting everybody's time. So your root cause, but you don't. Yeah, man. Come on, man. Look at this guy. I don't mind provocative person on the question, but don't let me use any harsh words on people on social media. I don't want to do that. But ask some serious questions. Anybody got serious questions, I'll give you a serious answer. Anyway, so let's finish on a positive note. Thank you very much for joining. It's Monday, so we're gonna have a great week. And so I'll go live probably for sure Wednesday and then Thursday again. I may even try to go live on Tuesday. So I know I'm doing it back to front. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even Friday maybe. But definitely Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I try to do as much as I can. I keep the interest going, I still people don't still send the questions in early enough. I'd like to be able to match some of the presentations with some of the questions that people have, but hopefully that helps. And so just in closing, you can combine just traditional medical problems with hormonal problems, with functional problems, with performance problems, because most doctors can't find disease if you have dysfunction. Most doctors can't find disease if your function is going down. So it's a language that we're not trained in. So unless doctors are trained in functional medicine or integrative medicine or alternative medicine or holistic medicine, they're not going to kind of get it. That doesn't mean they don't know their medicine, but unfortunately they can only reach a certain level of results, because when you incorporate the functional medicine, the integrative medicine, the holistic medicine with the knowledge of conventional medicine, you can far exceed traditional medical care. Easy. Hands down, easy thing to do because you're never relying on a two-dimensional model. You're looking at all the different possibilities, whether it's genetic, micronutrients, intracellular, food inflammation, whether you're looking at the measurements of immunological markers. You just do the whole thorough job. That's the way it's supposed to be done. That's why giving quick answers, simple answers, they're generally okay, but it's better to give a comprehensive answer where possible. You are fine. Don't listen to that Debbie Downer. Yeah, I just amused. I'd like to be helpful wherever I can. So that enough said. I don't need to go. Okay, hello there, 15 Alonso, sounds Italian. All right, yeah, love to international people there. Hopefully if this COVID thing calms down, if people behave themselves and just take some precautions, it calms down, we in America might be able to travel international. Right now, they're banning us from going anywhere. So I want to travel around the world, get back. That's one of the things that motivate me. And so one of the other things I'd like to be able to tell you is that, look, I don't want to go heavy on medicine all the time. We can talk about how, environmental things, travel things, family things, lifestyle things, they really psychological things. They're integrated and interact with these medical problems. I always say, sure, there's a small group of people, no matter what, they're going to have medical problems, but most people don't have the genes for it. It's really their environment, and their environment is dictated by their work, their relationship, the children, the demands, multiple jobs, all these issues, having access to good quality food. There's a lot of complicated stuff out there. You don't want to blame people, because sometimes I get so many cases where people come in with a problem with their weight or problem with a health issue. They're hardly eating anything. They're not even eating out. So you have to sympathize them. Maybe at one point they were doing the wrong things, and the wrong things means the damage that's done by having multiple jobs. Eating on the run just because you have not being able to afford certain things. So then once the damage is done, it's a little bit harder. But you got to sympathize wherever possible. Anyway, that's my job at least. I've got to sympathize. I've got to look at it from everybody's angle. So hopefully the information I've said is useful. It's for information and education purposes. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can on my bio, or just reach out on Instagram. And you have a great rest of the week if I don't hear from you or don't see you. But if you want to tune in, I look forward to that, and we can mix it up with some other areas. So maybe we can keep talking about the nutrition and healthy fats and unhealthy fats, and talk about weight loss, things like that. All right, my friends, take care, and thank you again for joining. So take care. Bye-bye.